When did your teacher completely lose it? I was in Miss Williams' study period when the earthquake hit. Not a big one, maybe 4.5, but enough to form a crack across the ceiling. Miss Williams stood up from her desk. Everyone back to work. No need for dramatics. Miss Williams, shouldn't we evacuate? There's a crack in the ceiling and she cut me off with that look she gives when someone asks to use Wikipedia as a source. In my 30 years at this school, I've never had a safety incident. She gestured at her wall of fame behind her desk. I'm the only faculty member who can say that. But the ceiling is perfectly fine. This building has survived earthquakes since 1952. 10 minutes later, another tremble. Smaller, but it was followed by something even worse. A grinding sound, like concrete scraping against metal. Dust was falling steadier now, coating our papers. Miss Williams, Jason pointed up. That support beam just shifted. She didn't even look up. That's the HVAC system. It always makes noise. My phone buzzed. Text from my mom. Get out of any buildings. May 8th earthquake coming. Emergency alert. I stood up to show her my phone. She snatched it from my hand. No phones during study period. She dropped it in her desk drawer with all the others she'd confiscated. These earthquake apps are designed to create panic, fear-mongering for ad revenue. More dust fell. Mia started coughing. The crack was now a full split, and I could see darkness between the edges. The support beam made another grinding sound. I wasn't sticking around. I started packing my stuff. Anyone who leaves gets a 0 on their research paper. She pulled up her gradebook on the computer. That's 40% of your final grade. Want to explain that to colleges? That's when the janitor burst through the door. Everyone out. Building's compromised. Get out! Miss Williams actually shoved him. You're creating panic! She slammed the door and locked it. Then she did something I'll never forget. She started pulling down the blinds so other teachers couldn't see in. I've worked too hard for too long to let manufactured hysteria ruin my perfect record. She was actually shaking. That witch at Washington High had only had one paper cut incident. One. And if she thinks she deserves the award, she has another thing coming. A chunk of concrete the size of a textbook crashed onto Emily's desk. She screamed and jumped back. We all did. That's from construction next door. Miss Williams was basically shrieking now. They're trying to sabotage me. The timing is too convenient. The support beam wasn't just making noise anymore. It was bending. Actually visibly bending in the middle like a straw. The entire ceiling was sagging down with it. Sarah was crying. Please, my dad's a structural engineer. He says old buildings can pancake in seconds. Please let us leave. Your father wants my award. They all do. 30 years. 0 incidents. Perfect record. That's when the lights started flickering. A water pipe burst through one of the cracks, spraying everywhere. The sound coming from above us was like a giant chewing gravel. I looked at Jason. He looked at me. We both looked at the fire alarm. Don't even think about it. Miss Williams moved to block us. False alarms are expulsion. Criminal charges. I'll ruin every single one of you. Another chunk fell. Then another. The grinding turned into a shrieking metal sound that hurt my ears. Jason played football. I ran track. We both moved at the same time. He went low, tackling her at the waist. I went for the alarm. My hand hit the lever just as Miss Williams grabbed my hair. Vandalism. Assault. You're destroying everything. The alarm blared. 20 students fought for the door at once. Miss Williams was still screaming about her perfect record, her award, the superintendent. We made it to the parking lot just as the rumbling turned into a roar. The entire second floor of the library collapsed into the first, right where we'd been sitting. The dust cloud was massive. When it cleared, the library was just gone. Pancaked. But we were alive. Miss Williams stood there in the parking lot, covered in dust, still muttering, 30 years. Perfect record. They sabotaged me. The superintendent. The fire chief said we'd evacuated with maybe 45 seconds to spare. Any longer and we'd have been crushed. But that wasn't even the craziest part. Because a few days later, we found out the real reason Miss Williams refused to let us leave. The parking lot was chaos with fire trucks pulling up and EMTs running toward us with their medical bags, while the library behind us kept making these horrible settling noises like a dying animal. Miss Williams was standing off to the side, still covered in dust, and she kept repeating the same thing over and over about how someone had sabotaged her perfect 30-year record. An EMT checked my vitals and shined a light in my eyes while my hands wouldn't stop shaking no matter how hard I tried to make them still. The adrenaline was wearing off and I felt like I might throw up. More chunks of the building were falling inside with crashes that made everyone jump. Parents were pulling into the parking lot, so fast they were almost hitting each other. The fire chief climbed up on one of the trucks with a megaphone. Listen up, everyone. That building was 45 seconds from total collapse when you evacuated. Miss Williams suddenly screamed that this was all planned and someone wanted to destroy her perfect record, and the superintendent was behind it. My mom's car screeched into the lot and she ran toward me faster than I'd ever seen her move. She grabbed me so tight I couldn't breathe and kept saying my name over and over. Call your dad. Tell him you're okay, she said, pulling back to look at me. I had to explain that my phone was buried under 2 floors of collapsed library because Miss Williams had confiscated it along with everyone else's phones. Mom's face went white when she realized all the evidence of the emergency alerts was gone with those phones. That evening we watched the local news from our couch, and they called it a miraculous evacuation, but didn't say one word about Miss Williams keeping us inside. The district spokesperson on TV said it was an unfortunate infrastructure incident and praised their quick emergency response. I wanted to throw the remote at the screen. My friend texted me screenshots from our class group chat where everyone was arguing about whether Jason and I were heroes or idiots for attacking a teacher. Half the class said we saved their lives, but the other half said we could have been expelled for nothing if the building hadn't actually collapsed. Sarah posted that her dad, the structural engineer, said we were lucky to be alive. Someone else said their parents were going to sue the school. The arguments went on all night, and I felt more alone than ever, even though I knew we'd done the right thing. The next morning, I woke up to an email saying school was canceled indefinitely, while they assessed structural damage to other buildings. At the bottom was a warning that all students and staff shouldn't talk to media about the incident, while the investigation was ongoing. It felt like a threat more than a warning. My mom said it was probably their lawyers trying to control the story. Texts started flying around that Miss Williams had been placed on administrative leave, but nobody knew for sure. Someone's older brother who worked security at the school said he saw her car in the staff parking lot at 6 in the morning, but security made her leave. Another rumor said she'd been escorted out by police, but that turned out to be fake. Nobody knew what was really happening with her, and the school wasn't saying anything. That evening I was scrolling through Instagram when I got a DM from someone named Alba Klein. She ran this underground student newspaper blog that the administration hated because she always posted stuff they didn't want public. Her message said she wanted to interview me about what really happened in that classroom because she'd heard from 3 different students that Miss Williams had locked us in. I was scared of getting in more trouble, but I was also desperate for someone to tell the truth about what happened. Alba said to meet her at the coffee shop on 3rd Street the next morning if I wanted to help document everything. I barely slept that night thinking about whether I should go. The coffee shop was mostly empty when I got there, and Alba was sitting in the back corner with a laptop and a recorder. She explained that we needed to document everything while it was still fresh in everyone's minds. We need witness statements from everyone who was in that room, she said, typing fast on her laptop. She showed me how to file FOIA requests for official records, and said we needed any photos or videos that existed from before or after. For the first time since the collapse, I felt like someone was actually listening and taking this seriously. She said the district would try to bury this, but if we had enough evidence, they couldn't ignore it. We spent 2 hours going through every detail I could remember while she took notes and asked follow-up questions. She had already talked to 5 other students, and their stories all matched mine. Just as we were leaving, I got a text from Jason that made my stomach drop. His football coach had pulled him aside after practice and warned him that his conduct was affecting his eligibility for the team. The coach said tackling a teacher even in an emergency reflected poorly on the athletic program and the school. Jason said the coach kept talking about scholarships and college recruiters and how this could ruin everything he'd worked for. I couldn't believe they were actually punishing him for saving our lives. That night I couldn't sleep and kept hearing the grinding metal sound from the library, even though it wasn't there. My sheets were soaked with sweat, and every time I closed my eyes I felt dust falling on my face. I wonder what Miss Williams was really protecting with that perfect 30-year record. Seems like there's something deeper than just wanting an award that made her risk 20 students' lives. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up trying to sleep and went to the kitchen. My hands were shaking when I tried to pour water and I dropped the glass on the floor. The crash made me jump, and suddenly I was back in that classroom with chunks of concrete falling. My mom found me sitting on the kitchen floor picking up glass pieces with my bare hands. She pulled me up and made hot chocolate like when I was little, not saying anything about the tears on my face. The next morning, she was already dressed for work when I came downstairs, but she had her laptop open at the kitchen table. She said we needed to file a formal complaint with the district about what Miss Williams did. I didn't want to think about it anymore, but she kept saying nothing would change if we didn't document everything officially. We sat there for 3 hours while I told her every single detail I could remember. She typed it all up, asking questions about exact times and who said what and where everyone was standing. My hands started shaking again when I described the support beam bending, but she kept typing. She made me read through it twice to make sure everything was accurate before she hit submit on the district website. The automated response came back immediately saying Principal Duncan Knight would meet with us in 2 days to discuss our concerns. My stomach churned reading his name because everyone knew he always sided with teachers no matter what. 2 days later, we sat in his office while he shuffled papers and talked about my improper activation of emergency equipment. He never once mentioned Miss Williams locking the door or ignoring the evacuation warnings. He kept using words like protocol and proper channels and chain of command while looking at his computer screen instead of us. My mom tried to explain about the building collapse, but he cut her off saying the fire alarm activation was premature and unnecessary. He said I should have reported my concerns to the office instead of taking matters into my own hands. I pulled out my phone to show him the screenshots my mom's friend took of the emergency alerts that day. He barely glanced at them before saying those weren't official school communications, and following them violated established procedures. He said students needed to trust faculty judgment, not outside sources that might not understand the full situation. My mom grabbed my arm when I started to stand up because she could see how mad I was getting. Knight scheduled another meeting for the following week to discuss my disciplinary consequences for the false alarm. He handed us a packet about the student code of conduct with the sections about emergency equipment highlighted in yellow. Walking out of his office, I felt like I was going to throw up from anger and frustration. That afternoon, Alba texted me that she'd filed FOIA requests for all the maintenance records and internal emails about the building. She said the district had 30 days to respond, but they'd probably request extensions to delay everything. She was already planning to file appeals if they tried to claim exemptions or redact too much information. The truth was going to come out eventually, but the wheels moved so slow while the lies spread fast. I tried to find the janitor who'd tried to evacuate us, but heard from another custodian that he'd been placed on leave. They were investigating him for entering a classroom without permission and creating an unsafe situation. Someone who tried to save us was getting punished while Miss Williams had union protection and paid administrative leave. The whole thing made me so sick I had to run to the bathroom. 2 days later, the construction company working next door released a statement to the local news. They denied their work caused any debris to fall in our classroom and said they'd suspended all work pending investigation. They had timestamps showing their equipment was shut down during the earthquake and their site was secure. Now the district couldn't blame outside factors like Miss Williams kept claiming during the collapse. Sarah's dad, who really was a structural engineer, posted a detailed Twitter thread that night about how older buildings fail. He included diagrams showing how support beams buckle and floors pancake when the load shifts. He explained exactly what would have happened to us if we'd stayed in that room another minute. The thread got thousands of retweets and parents started commenting about their own kids in old school buildings. Local news picked it up and suddenly everyone was talking about school infrastructure and emergency protocols. The next morning, the district sent out a school-wide email about maintaining a positive safety culture. They talked about following proper emergency procedures and respecting the chain of command during crisis situations. They never mentioned Miss Williams by name or admitted anything went wrong that day. The language was so clean and corporate, it sounded like lawyers wrote every word. They were already trying to make everyone forget what really happened by burying it in bureaucratic nonsense. 3 days later, I was pushing my cart through the produce section at the grocery store when I spotted Miss Williams near the apples. She saw me at the exact same moment and her whole body went stiff. Without grabbing anything from the display, she turned her cart sharp and headed down the cereal aisle. She looked smaller than before, like the whole thing had shrunk her somehow. Her hair wasn't perfect anymore, and she had this hunched way of walking now. Part of me wanted to follow her and say something, but I didn't feel sorry for her at all. She almost got us all killed for some stupid award that didn't even matter anymore. I kept shopping, but my hands were shaking a little as I picked out bananas. The next morning, I got an email from someone named Paolo Langley, who said he worked for District Risk Management. He wanted to schedule interviews with every student who was in the room that day. His email went on about how this was just routine information gathering to help them understand what happened. The way he wrote it made it sound like he was doing us a favor by listening to our stories. We all knew what this really was, though. They were building their defense case and trying to figure out how to protect themselves from lawsuits. I wrote back that I could meet him Thursday after school. I spent the next 2 days getting ready by writing down everything I remembered in order. When Thursday came, I walked into the conference room at the district office and Paolo was already there with his laptop open. He stood up to shake my hand and gave me this fake concerned smile. "Thanks for coming in. This shouldn't take long. He started asking me to walk through what happened that day. At first, his questions seemed normal, but then he kept circling back to the moment I pulled the fire alarm. Did you consider any other options before pulling the alarm? I told him the ceiling was falling. I understand that's how it appeared to you, but did you try talking to Miss Williams again? I explained that chunks of concrete were hitting desks. Right, but before you pulled the alarm, did you think about maybe getting another adult? The support beam was bending and we had seconds to get out. I'm just trying to understand if you considered alternative de-escalation strategies. He kept typing on his laptop without looking at me. I stayed calm and kept repeating the same thing over and over. The ceiling was actively collapsing and we had to evacuate immediately. He wrote everything down but never made eye contact with me once. After an hour of the same questions asked different ways, he finally let me leave. That weekend, Alba texted our group chat that her FOIA request got delayed. She was this girl from my history class whose mom was a paralegal, and she'd filed a Freedom of Information Act request for all the district's safety records. The district claimed they needed more time to review sensitive personnel information before they could release anything. Alba said this was standard stalling tactics they use when they don't want to hand over documents. It was frustrating watching them drag their feet when all we wanted was the truth about what they knew, and when they knew it. The truth shouldn't be this hard to uncover, but they were making it impossible on purpose. Monday morning, Jason got called to the athletic director's office during first period. When he came back to class, his face was red and his jaw was clenched tight. He passed me a note that said he was suspended from the next 2 football games pending a full review of his physical altercation with staff. Those were the games where college scouts were supposed to come watch him play. The games that could determine if he got a scholarship or not. I felt sick to my stomach that he was punished for helping me save everyone's lives. He tackled Miss Williams so I could pull the alarm, and now they were ruining his future over it. That evening, Alba got an anonymous email from someone using a throwaway account. The person said we should look into the Safety Excellence Award evaluation window and its specific criteria. They wrote that the timing of the incident wasn't a coincidence, and we needed to check the school board minutes from the past year. Alba forwarded it to me and Jason, and we spent hours that night searching through boring meeting documents online. We finally found what we were looking for buried in a policy document from 8 months ago. The award criteria specifically said that any school with an evacuation would get points deducted because it counted as a safety incident regardless of the reason. Schools were literally being told to keep students in dangerous situations to maintain their perfect safety records. The whole system was designed to make administrators choose between awards and actual student safety. Reading it made me so mad I wanted to throw my laptop across the room. The way Paolo kept asking the same questions but differently makes me wonder if he was trying to get them to say something specific, like maybe looking for one little word that could change everything. I couldn't sleep that night thinking about how we were just numbers on Miss Williams's perfect record sheet. We weren't actual human beings whose lives mattered to her. The system turned us into metrics and statistics that she could manipulate for her own career advancement. It was a different kind of violence than the falling ceiling, but it hurt just as much knowing we meant nothing to them. 2 days later, Paolo called me back saying he needed to clarify some points from our interview. This time he started hinting that there had been previous minor incidents in Miss Williams's classroom that were never formally reported. He wouldn't give me any details but kept asking if I'd ever seen her refuse to let students leave before. He suggested other students had raised concerns in the past, but nothing official was ever filed. The pattern had been there all along, but nobody did anything about it. Thursday afternoon, I was in the bathroom stall when 2 teachers came in talking about Miss Williams. They were saying the union would definitely protect her because she followed district guidelines about not evacuating without official authorization from the main office. They sounded way more worried about setting a bad precedent than about what almost happened to us. One of them said if teachers could get in trouble for following the rules, then nobody would want to work there anymore. The adult world felt completely broken listening to them care more about contracts than kids' lives. My head started pounding worse that night and wouldn't stop for days. Mom kept giving me aspirin, but nothing helped. The pain got so bad I couldn't focus in class, and my teachers kept asking if I was okay. Finally, on Wednesday, I went to the school clinic during lunch. The nurse took my blood pressure and asked about my symptoms. She said it was stress-related tension from the trauma, and gave me some pamphlets about breathing exercises and coping strategies. The papers talked about meditation and positive thinking, which felt pretty useless when I kept seeing that ceiling crack in my mind. I stuffed them in my backpack and went back to class with my head still throbbing. That afternoon, my phone started blowing up with notifications. Someone had posted a video in our class group chat that I'd never seen before. It was from inside the study room right before the evacuation. The video was shaky and only 30 seconds long, but it showed Miss Williams walking between desks and physically taking phones from students. You could see her grabbing them out of people's hands and dropping them into her desk drawer. One kid tried to show her something on the screen, but she just yanked it away. The timestamp showed this was right when the emergency alerts were coming through. Finally, we had actual evidence of what she did. The video spread through the whole school within hours. Parents started sharing it on Facebook and Twitter. Local news picked it up by dinner time. The school tried to say the video was taken out of context, but everyone could see exactly what happened. The next morning, the construction company that had been working next door released their official work logs to the media. The logs showed they had stopped all work completely during both earthquakes, as their safety protocol required. They hadn't been doing any demolition or heavy work that day at all. This totally destroyed Miss Williams's claims about construction debris causing the chunks of concrete to fall. The danger had come entirely from our building's structural problems. The construction manager went on the news and said they'd actually been concerned about our building's stability for weeks. More evidence kept coming out every day. Alba texted me Thursday night saying she'd gotten something huge. Her mom's friend worked at the district office and had leaked an internal memo from Agnes Kaufman. The memo was dated the week before the collapse and talked about maintaining an incident-free week during the award evaluation period. It said any evacuation for any reason would immediately disqualify the school from consideration for the Safety Excellence Award. The pressure hadn't just come from Miss Williams wanting her perfect record. The administration had created this whole system that punished teachers for keeping kids safe. I printed out the memo and took it to Principal Knight's office Friday morning. He read it and his face didn't change at all. He called it a motivational communication, meant to encourage safety awareness. When I pointed out it literally said evacuations would disqualify us, he said I was misinterpreting the intent. He kept using these corporate words like stakeholder engagement and performance metrics that meant nothing. I left his office shaking with frustration at how he could twist everything to avoid taking responsibility. Meanwhile, Paolo had been doing his own investigation. He'd tracked down the janitor who had tried to warn us and interviewed him at his house. The janitor showed Paolo a copy of a maintenance ticket he'd filed the week before the collapse. The ticket specifically mentioned cracks in the ceiling of the library's second floor. It had been marked as non-urgent by someone in administration. The janitor had tried to follow up, but was told it would be addressed during summer break. Paolo posted screenshots of the ticket online and it went viral immediately. Then Alba got another breakthrough. Someone sent her a screenshot from the maintenance system showing that Miss Williams had personally logged in and changed the ticket status. She'd changed it from ceiling cracks, structural concern, to HVAC noise. No action needed. The timestamp showed she did this 3 days before the earthquake. She literally had written warning about the exact structural danger that almost killed us, and she buried it to protect her perfect safety record. My anger turned cold when I saw that screenshot. This wasn't just panic or poor judgment during an emergency anymore. She had known about the danger in advance and deliberately covered it up. We now had timestamped evidence proving Miss Williams knew about the ceiling problems and actively suppressed the information. Alba said her dad's lawyer friend told her this changed everything from negligence to willful endangerment. The documentation was building into something that couldn't be ignored or explained away. The evidence was all digital with timestamps and login records that couldn't be faked. I sat in my room that night trying to process everything we'd learned. We almost died not from some random natural disaster or unavoidable accident, but from someone's deliberate choice to ignore danger. The betrayal hurt almost as much as the fear had. Adults were supposed to protect us, but they'd chosen awards and metrics over our lives. My parents kept saying we were lucky to be alive, but it wasn't luck that almost killed us. It was specific choices by specific people who knew better. The school board announced they were scheduling a public meeting for next Tuesday, with facility safety protocols on the agenda. They still wouldn't directly mention what happened to us, but everyone knew what it was really about. Parents were organizing on social media to show up in huge numbers. My mom joined 3 different Facebook groups planning the attendance. People were making signs and preparing speeches. The pressure for real accountability was finally building beyond what the district could contain or deflect. 2 days later, Jason texted me a photo of the letter that arrived at his house. Official school district letterhead stating his 2-game suspension would stand regardless of any ongoing investigation outcomes. His dad was in the background of the photo already on the phone with someone, probably their lawyer. Jason's mom had driven straight to the district office with copies of the emergency alert and photos of the collapsed library, but the secretary just took them and said someone would review them later. The suspension meant Jason would miss the games where college scouts were coming specifically to see him play. His whole senior year recruitment plan was basically destroyed over saving 20 lives. That afternoon, my own letter came in the mail and my hands were shaking as I opened it. The district scheduled my disciplinary hearing for the following week regarding misuse of emergency equipment and participating in assault of staff, which made it sound like we'd beaten up Miss Williams for fun instead of trying to get everyone out of a collapsing building. My mom grabbed her phone before I even finished reading and called her friend from law school who did education law. While she was on the phone explaining everything, another text came through from Alba. Someone from the district office had reached out to her anonymously with information she needed to see immediately. We met at the coffee shop on 3rd Street where Agnes from the district's Human Resources Department was already waiting in the back corner booth. She kept looking around nervously as she slid a folder across the table showing Miss Williams' employment contract with a section highlighted in yellow. The retirement bonus clause showed she'd get an extra $40,000 if she maintained her perfect safety record through June. Agnes explained that several teachers got these bonuses for various achievements, but Miss Williams's was the biggest because 30 years without a single incident was considered impossible. She'd literally been months away from cashing in when the earthquake hit. Alba took photos of everything while I sat there realizing Miss Williams had been willing to let us die for $40,000. Agnes made us promise not to use her name because she could lose her job for showing us confidential documents, but said someone needed to know the truth. Back at Alba's house, we spent hours going through everything trying to figure out what to do with this information. $40,000 for 30 years of perfect safety records? That's quite a specific number for a bonus that Miss Williams just happened to be months away from collecting when all this went down. Publishing it would expose Agnes as the source since only HR would have access to those specific documents. We decided to hold on to it unless absolutely necessary for protecting ourselves, but knowing about the money made everything even worse. The next morning, Alba got an email from a law firm representing Miss Williams, demanding she remove all content about the earthquake incident from her blog within 24 hours or face legal action for defamation. Alba's dad looked at it and said it was standard intimidation tactics, but we still had to be careful about what we published. Meanwhile, Paolo finally responded to Alba's information request with a carefully worded email confirming that yes, the district had various bonus structures and award criteria that could potentially influence decision-making, but he couldn't comment on individual cases or draw conclusions about specific motivations. He was basically confirming everything while legally covering himself from any liability. The morning of my hearing, I wore my most serious outfit and brought a folder with printed screenshots of the emergency alert, photos of the collapsed library, and a timeline showing we had 45 seconds between pulling the alarm and the building pancaking. The panel of 3 administrators sat behind a long table taking notes, while I explained that immediate action was necessary to preserve life. They asked why I didn't follow proper evacuation protocols, and I showed them the photo of Miss Williams physically blocking the door. They asked why I didn't report to another teacher, and I explained she'd locked us in. They wrote everything down without any expression like robots programmed to document, but not actually listen. After an hour, they said they'd review everything and make a determination within 10 business days. That night, Alba published her investigation with all the documents we'd gathered, except anything that could identify Agnes. She included the timeline, the maintenance ticket from 6 months ago, Paolo's confirmation about bonus structures and testimonies from 8 students who were in the room. Within 2 hours, it was shared over 300 times and picked up by 2 local news stations. Parent Facebook groups were screaming for accountability and organizing protests at the next board meeting. The district's PR department went into overdrive trying to control the narrative. Miss Williams released a statement through her attorney the next day, claiming the construction next door had created vibrations that caused unnecessary panic among students who were already anxious from social media fear-mongering. She specifically named Jason and me as violent and disruptive students, who had created a dangerous situation by attacking a teacher and causing a stampede. She claimed we'd endangered other students with our reckless behavior, and that any injuries were our fault, not hers. Reading her statement made me physically sick, because she was literally rewriting history to make us the villains for saving everyone's lives. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday night, and over 200 parents showed up with signs demanding answers. Paolo presented his timeline with surgical precision, showing the maintenance ticket, the 45-second window, and photos of the completely flattened library. Parents gasped when he showed the before and after photos side by side. He confirmed that based on structural analysis, anyone remaining in the room would have been crushed. But the board members just sat there with neutral expressions, taking notes and asking procedural questions about evacuation protocols and chain of command. Agnes stood up in the back row and started passing something around to the other parents, while the board members shuffled their papers. It was a printed email that made people gasp as they read it. The email reached me and my stomach dropped. Miss Williams had sent it to Principal Knight at 7:42 a.m. the morning of the collapse with the subject line, "Today's evaluation window." And in it she wrote that we needed to maintain normal operations during the safety inspector's visit, no matter what disruptions occurred, because this was her final chance at the Excellence Award before retirement. She actually typed the words, "Nothing can jeopardize this evaluation window," and CC'd 3 other administrators. Parents started shouting and pointing at the email copies while board members tried to call for order, but nobody was listening anymore. Agnes from the teachers union got up to the microphone even though nobody called on her and started talking about impossible standards and contradictory policies that forced teachers to choose between safety protocols and performance metrics. Some parents actually nodded along while others yelled about their kids almost dying and how nothing justified keeping students in danger. The room split right down the middle, with half the crowd demanding criminal charges and the other half talking about systemic problems and budget cuts. Security guards moved closer to the arguing groups while board members huddled together, whispering and passing notes back and forth. After 20 minutes of chaos, they called a recess. And when we came back, they announced Miss Williams would be placed on unpaid leave pending a full investigation that could take several months. Parents wanted immediate firing, but the union rep said due process had to be followed, and the board agreed, even though people booed and threw crumpled programs at the stage. 2 days later, I got an official letter about my disciplinary hearing outcome, which said 3 days suspension with a note about mitigating circumstances that wouldn't affect my college applications or permanent record. My lawyer said I was lucky it wasn't worse, since technically I did assault a teacher even if it saved lives, and I should just accept it and move on. I signed the paperwork in the principal's office while he avoided eye contact and mumbled about difficult situations and learning experiences. Jason's suspension stayed at 5 days with no mitigating circumstances because he actually tackled Miss Williams, and the football coach said he'd have to miss both playoff games, which meant the team would probably lose without their starting linebacker. At lunch, kids kept coming up to our table with different opinions about whether we were heroes or troublemakers who cost the team their shot at state championships. Some of Jason's teammates wouldn't even look at us and moved to different tables, while others said we did the right thing, but wished we'd waited until after the season. The whole school felt divided, with some kids wearing safety first buttons and others wearing team jerseys to show whose side they were on. 3 weeks passed in this weird tension before they finally condemned the library officially and brought in demolition crews to tear down what was left of the collapsed structure. We watched from the parking lot as the wrecking ball smashed through the remaining walls and bulldozers pushed the rubble into dump trucks. They set up 12 portable classrooms in the soccer field and shuffled everyone's schedules around so different classes met at different times, and nobody knew where they were supposed to be half the time. Teachers had to share the portables and carry their supplies in boxes between periods, while students sat on the floor in hallways during free periods, because there wasn't enough space anymore. The chaos made everyone stressed, and fights broke out daily over stupid things like who got to use the one working water fountain, or whose fault it was that calculus now met at 6:30 a.m. I found Jason sitting alone at our old lunch spot 3 months after everything happened and sat down next to him without saying anything at first. We both looked different somehow, like we'd aged more than just 3 months, and understood things about the world we wished we didn't know. He showed me his rejection letter from his top college choice that mentioned his disciplinary record, and I showed him my acceptance to my safety school that was all I could afford anyway. We didn't need to talk about how saving 20 lives had somehow made us the bad guys, or how Miss Williams still had defenders who said we ruined a good teacher's career over a misunderstanding. The truth was messier than anyone wanted to admit, with heroes and villains all mixed together, and no clean resolution that made everyone happy. That night, I started writing my college essay on my laptop about what happens when schools care more about looking safe than actually being safe. I didn't write about pulling fire alarms or tackling teachers because that wasn't really the point of what happened to us. I wrote about how 2 teenagers recognized danger while adults argued about metrics and awards and reputation and liability and everything except the ceiling that was literally falling on our heads. What a journey that was. Thanks for hanging out and discovering all of this right alongside me. Until next time, like the video. It helps more than you think.